I slammed the phone down so hard, the battery cover cracked right off and skidded across the kitchen floor. My hands were shaking, my chest was tight, and for the first time in 67 years of living, I was done. Done being invisible, done being scheduled, done being treated like a calendar entry instead of a human being. What came out of my mouth next, 8 quiet words spoken into a dead phone line, would change everything my son's family thought they knew about me. But before I tell you what I said, I need to take you back to where it all started. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if no one has told you lately that your story matters, I'm telling you right now, subscribe. Because this one's for all of us. My name is Evelyn Parker. I am 67 years old. I live in a small house about 20 minutes outside of Denver, Colorado. And up until about 18 months ago, I genuinely believed that being a good mother meant being available. Always. Completely. Without complaint or condition. I believed that with everything I had. I believed it the way you believe in gravity, not because someone proved it to you, but because it just always seemed to be there, pulling you towards certain people, certain roles, certain quiet sacrifices that nobody ever puts a name to. I believed it the way women of my generation were quietly taught to believe it, sitting in kitchens and church pews and school pickup lines, watching the women who came before us fold themselves smaller and smaller until their own needs became something almost embarrassing to mention. I am not angry at those women. I am one of those women. But I am also done being one of those women. And I want to tell you exactly how I got here. I spent 35 years as an elementary school assistant, kindergarten through 5th grade. I helped children learn to read. I tied shoes. I talked little ones through their first panic attacks when parents dropped them off crying. I sat with kids who ate lunch alone. I stayed late. I came in early. I gave that job everything I had, and when I retired 4 years ago, I told myself, Evelyn, it is your turn now. My husband Robert had passed 2 years before I retired. A heart attack, sudden and cruel, on a Tuesday morning in April when the whole world was blooming outside our kitchen window. We had 38 years together. We were going to travel. We were going to take a painting class. We were going to slow down and finally learn how to simply be together without a schedule pressing us from all sides. We never got to do any of that. So when I retired, I carried that grief into my plans. I signed up for a beginner's painting class at the community center. I bought seeds for the garden. I called 2 old girlfriends I had lost touch with and made real plans dinners, not just texts. I started sleeping past 6 in the morning for the first time in 4 decades, and for about 3 weeks it was wonderful. Then my son called. My son Daniel is 41 years old. He is kind. He is thoughtful in the way that gentle people are thoughtful quietly, without performance, in small gestures that you only notice if you're paying attention. He gets that from his father. Robert was exactly the same way, warm and present, but constitutionally allergic to conflict, completely unable to look a difficult moment in the face and stay there. Daniel married Natalie Brooks 8 years ago. She was 34 when they met. A marketing manager for a mid-sized tech firm in Denver, sharp and decisive, and always moving at a speed that made me tired just watching her. She is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that from the beginning, because this story is not about a villain. It is about something quieter, and in some ways more painful than that. It is about how good people can make you feel invisible without ever meaning to. Liam was born the year after they married. He came into this world with his father's eyes and his mother's personality, intense, curious, loud, in the best possible way. I fell in love with that child immediately and completely. From his first week of life, I was at their house 3 times a week holding him while Natalie caught up on sleep. I did not mind. I wanted to be there. Nobody asked me. I simply showed up because I wanted to. That I would later understand was where the problem began. Nobody asked me because nobody needed to ask me. I was already there. I was already saying yes before the question left anyone's mouth. Daniel's call that first week of my retirement was not a demand, not even close. His voice was warm and a little uncertain, the way it gets when he is about to ask for something he feels guilty about. Mom, I hate to even bring this up, but Natalie has this huge presentation on Thursday, and her regular sitter just canceled. Do you think there's any chance? I know you just retired. I know you're probably swamped with stuff. Of course. What time do you need me? You sure you don't have anything? Daniel, what time? 7:30. I know that's early. I'll be there at 7. And I meant it. I was happy to do it. I drove over at 7 on a Thursday morning with a bag of Liam's favorite crackers and a picture book I had found at the bookstore the day before, and we spent the day together, the two of us building things out of couch cushions and watching cartoons and eating peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles the way he liked them. When Natalie came home that evening, she looked exhausted and relieved, and she squeezed my arm and said thank you. Just 2 words, but she meant them. That was the last time she said thank you for a long time. Here is how it happens, and I say it because I think this story belongs to more people than just me. I think if you are a mother, a grandmother, a woman of a certain age in this country, you know exactly how it happens. It happens the way the tide comes in, slowly, quietly, inch by inch. One Thursday babysitting becomes every Thursday babysitting. Every Thursday becomes 2 days a week. 2 days a week becomes pick up from school when Natalie has meetings running late. Pick up from school becomes, can you make him something for dinner while you're there? Making dinner becomes, do you mind just staying until we're back? We might be a little late. A little late becomes 9:30 at night, and by then you are exhausted, sitting in someone else's living room watching someone else's television, and somehow it has become just normal. Nobody sat me down and explained the new arrangement. Nobody handed me a schedule and said, sign here, this is your life now. It happened the way weather happens, gradual and then all at once. By the end of my first year of retirement, I was spending an average of 3 to 4 days a week, either at Daniel and Natalie's house or driving to and from it. My gardening had fallen 2 seasons behind. My painting class had long since been canceled. I had missed so many sessions they stopped saving me a spot. 2 of my old friends had quietly stopped inviting me to things because I had canceled on them so many times that they simply assumed I was unavailable. My refrigerator had a dedicated shelf for Liam's snacks. My back seat had his car seat strapped in permanently. My phone had more of his photos than my own memories. I am not telling you this so you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this so you understand that none of it felt like a crisis as it was happening. It just felt like love. It felt like what love was supposed to look like when you were the grandmother and the mother and the person in the family who had more time than everyone else and less somewhere urgent to be. It felt like what I was supposed to do. It was Natalie who started changing the temperature in ways I couldn't ignore. The first sign was the shift in language. In the early months, Daniel was always the one who called me. He would ask. He would apologize for asking. He would offer alternatives and tell me to say no if I needed to. That was my son, gentle, considerate, perpetually worried he was inconveniencing me. But as the months passed, Natalie started calling instead. And Natalie didn't ask the same way. Evelyn, I need you to get Liam on Tuesday. I have client calls. Not is Tuesday possible. Not would you be able to. Not only if you're free. Just I need you to. The first time she said it that way, I almost didn't notice. I was so trained to say yes that my mouth was already forming the word before my brain had finished registering the tone. I said yes, of course, Tuesday works fine. The second time a week later, Evelyn, we need you. Wednesday and Thursday this week, Liam has a dentist appointment Wednesday afternoon, and I can't rearrange my schedule. I noticed, but I told myself it was just Natalie being direct. She was direct. That was her personality. Efficiency, not cruelty. The third time I started to feel something cold settling in my chest. You need to come Friday morning and you can leave after dinner. You need to come. Not I need you. Not even we need you. You need to come. I sat with my phone in my lap for a full minute after that call ended, staring out my kitchen window at the garden that needed tending, at the painting supplies on the shelf that had a fine layer of dust on the lids, at my reading glasses, sitting on top of a novel I had been trying to finish for 4 months. And then I texted back, I'll be there, because I didn't know how to do anything else yet. I want to tell you about one specific Saturday, because that Saturday was the beginning of the end of the old Evelyn. I had been planning to go to a watercolor workshop at the community center. My friend Patricia had signed us both up 3 weeks in advance. It was a 4-hour class taught by a woman who had studied in Florence, and it cost $42, and I had been genuinely quietly excited about it, in the way you get excited when you've been hungry for something for a long time, and it's finally within reach. I had told Patricia yes. I had paid. I had already laid out what I was going to wear. On Friday night at 8:47, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Don't forget you have Liam tomorrow. We're leaving at 9. No question mark. No question period. Just a reminder that I had an obligation I had apparently agreed to without knowing I had agreed to it. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I called Daniel. Hey, Mom, everything okay? I had plans tomorrow, Daniel. Patricia and I are taking that watercolor class. There was a pause, not a long one. Oh, yeah, Natalie mentioned that she thought you were taking Liam. I never agreed to that. Did someone ask me? Another pause, longer this time. I think maybe she assumed we've had the trip planned for a while. Mom, it's just a day thing in the mountains. I thought Natalie had talked to you. She texted me 40 minutes ago. Oh, don't forget you have Liam tomorrow. I'm sorry, Mom. I'll talk to her. I need to know Daniel. Did anyone ask me, or was it just decided? He was quiet in that way he got when he was uncomfortable with the truth. I think it was just decided, he finally said. I'm sorry. I canceled on Patricia the next morning. I told her something came up which was true, just not in the way she understood it. I drove to Daniel's house at 9. Liam ran at me with his arms out and his sneakers on the wrong feet, and I loved him fiercely and completely, and spent the entire day trying not to think about Florence and watercolors and the thing I had given up without being asked. It was around this time that I started hearing things through the neighborhood grapevine. Small towns near big cities have long memories, and short distances between people and Denver's suburbs were no exception. Word traveled. My neighbor, Ruth, a retired school librarian who had known me since Liam was born, stopped me in the driveway one afternoon in late fall. She had her little dog on a leash and a look on her face that I knew immediately meant she was about to say something kind that would feel unkind to hear. Evelyn, can I ask you something? You can always ask me something. I ran into Natalie at the grocery store last week, over in produce. Okay. She was talking about her work schedule, how busy things were, and someone asked about Liam about childcare, and Ruth stopped, adjusted the leash. She said you were, and these are her words, not mine, she said you were a lonely retired woman who enjoys staying busy with the grandkids. The air went out of me like a punctured tire. Ruth was watching my face carefully. I didn't know if I should tell you. You should have told me. I know, I'm sorry. She said it like she was doing you a kindness. Like watching Liam was she made it sound like it was something you needed, not something she needed. I stood in my driveway for a moment longer than I should have. Thank you, Ruth. I went inside, closed the door behind me, and stood in the middle of my kitchen for a very long time. A lonely retired woman who enjoys staying busy with the grandkids. She had taken my love and my sacrifice, and she had dressed it up as pity. She had described my exhaustion as fulfillment. She had told strangers that my life without her demands would be empty, and she had done it so casually in the produce aisle while picking out apples or something without a second thought. That night, for the first time, I cried. Not for myself exactly, or not only for myself. I cried because I understood something I had been refusing to look at directly. I had become the kind of woman I promised myself I never would. A woman who had made herself so small and so useful that the people around her had forgotten she was also a person. I tried to talk to Daniel. I want to be fair to my son because he is genuinely a good man, and what happened in our family was not simple, and it was not all his fault. But he was also an adult who had watched his wife treat his mother like a scheduling problem and had found it more comfortable to look away. I called him on a weeknight after Liam was asleep, and I asked if we could talk, just the two of us. Of course, Mom. What's up? I want to talk about the arrangement we've fallen into, with Liam and my schedule. I could hear him shift, the way you shift when you know a conversation is going to cost something. Okay, yeah, what do you mean? I mean that somewhere in the last year things changed. I went from helping out occasionally to being scheduled 4 days a week without being asked, and I want to understand how we got there. You've always seemed okay with it. Because I was saying yes, but Daniel is someone asking me, or is it being assumed? Silence. I don't know that there's a formal, I think we've all just fallen into a rhythm. I canceled a class I paid for because Natalie texted me the night before to remind me I had Liam. She didn't ask. She reminded me, like it was already decided. I know, and I'm sorry about that. She should have asked. Yes, she should have. More silence. Mom, I don't know how to fix this without it becoming a whole thing. And there it was, the quiet center of the problem finally out in the open. I didn't know how to fix it without it becoming a whole thing, meaning without it becoming uncomfortable, without someone having to change, without conflict, which was the thing my son feared above everything else. Daniel, I said, and I kept my voice as steady as I could, I am not asking you to start a war. I am asking you to see me. To see that I have a life too, and that what's been happening lately doesn't feel like asking anymore. It feels like telling. He was quiet for a long time. "I'll talk to her," he said. I believed him. I don't know why, but I believed him. He talked to her. I know this because 2 days later my phone rang and Natalie's name was on the screen, and when I answered, her voice had an edge to it that I had never heard quite so clearly before. "I hear you have some concerns." Some concerns. Like I had filed a complaint with HR. I wouldn't call them concerns exactly. I just wanted to... "Evelyn, I work 50 hours a week. Daniel works 50 hours a week. We're both exhausted. We rely on you because you're family. I don't understand why that's suddenly a problem." It's not suddenly a problem. It's something that's been building. And I'm not saying I don't want to help. I do want to help. But there's a difference between helping and being... "I'm not having this conversation," she said. And she hung up. Not loudly, not dramatically. She just stopped talking and the line went dead, and I sat there holding my phone with a very peculiar feeling. Not anger, not yet. Something more like a quiet reckoning, like watching a fog lift and finally seeing clearly the terrain you've been stumbling through for months. Nothing had been resolved, but something had been seen. And seeing it, I discovered, was the beginning of something I couldn't yet name, but already couldn't take back. 3 weeks passed. During those 3 weeks, I kept showing up when asked. I kept saying yes, though now when I said it, something inside me was watching the word leave my mouth with a different kind of attention. I was saying yes, but I was also starting to take inventory of my time, of my exhaustion, of the things I had given up and the things I was still giving up every week. The painting class that had started in September without me. Patricia, who had found another friend to take the empty seat. The garden now heading into winter with half of what I had planned left unplanted. A standing Saturday lunch with my friend Gloria that I had canceled 5 times in 3 months until she'd stopped asking. I was keeping a list now, not on paper in my body, in the weight of it, in the way I sometimes sat in my car in Daniel and Natalie's driveway for an extra minute before going in just to breathe. And then the message came. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my kitchen drinking coffee and actually reading a full chapter, which had become a small luxury when my phone buzzed on the table. A text from Natalie. No greeting, no preamble. "I have a 4-day conference starting next Thursday in Chicago. I need you to be at our house by 7:30 a.m. each day and stay until at least 6. Daniel's hours are unpredictable. Liam can't be left alone after school. Plan accordingly." I read it 3 times. Plan accordingly. 4 days. 4 days of 8:30 to 6 minimum in someone else's house, rearranging my entire week. And the instruction wasn't a request. It wasn't even a question disguised as a request. It was a memo. It was a directive sent down from management to staff. I put my phone face down on the table and finished my coffee. Then I picked it back up and typed as calmly and clearly as I could. "Natalie, I can help with 1 afternoon pickup that week, but I'm not available for 4 full days. I have some things I've already committed to. I'm happy to help you find other options if you'd like." I hit send. I poured a second cup of coffee. I sat down with my book. My phone rang 11 minutes later. The sound of Natalie's voice when she called was different from anything I had heard from her before. Not louder exactly, but harder, compressed into something dense and precise, the way a voice gets when someone has made a decision and is using the call to execute it rather than discuss it. "Evelyn, I need you to reconsider. 4 days is not that much to ask. 4 days is actually quite a lot to ask on 11 minutes notice. This conference has been on the calendar for weeks. I assumed you'd be available." "You assumed without asking." "I shouldn't have to ask. You're his grandmother." "I am his grandmother, and I love him. But that doesn't mean my schedule belongs to you." She made a sound, short and sharp. "What exactly is so important that you can't help your own family for 4 days? That's not really... You're retired, Evelyn. You don't have a job. You don't have somewhere to be every morning. What is it that you're protecting your schedule for?" I felt something rise in me then, hot and old and long overdue. "Natalie, what I do with my time is mine to decide, not yours. I'm not arguing about this." "Good. Neither am I. I need you at that house next Thursday at 7:30. And then she said it. After months of "you needs" and "I need yous" and "plan accordinglys," she finally said the thing out loud that had been the silent shape of every single one of those interactions. "You will babysit because I said so." The room went absolutely still. Not the kind of still where nothing is happening. The kind of still where everything is happening underneath the surface, where something has finally broken through and now everything is going to be different, and both of you know it, even if only one of you has said anything yet. I thought about the watercolor class. I thought about Gloria, who stopped asking. I thought about Ruth in the driveway and the produce aisle, and lonely retired woman who enjoys staying busy. I thought about a Saturday afternoon 2 months ago when I sat in Daniel's living room at 9:45 at night, running on 3 hours of sleep, waiting for them to come home from a dinner that ran long, and I had been too tired to even turn the television on. I thought about Robert, about what he would have seen in all of this if he were still here, and I thought he would have been very quiet and very gentle and very clear. I breathed in, I breathed out, and then for the first time in as long as I could remember, I said exactly what I meant in exactly as many words as it required. Natalie, you have every right in the world to make decisions for your son, but you do not have the right to make decisions about my life. I love Liam with everything I have, and I will not be there next Thursday. If you need childcare, you need to arrange childcare. That is not my job. Silence. Not argument. Not a follow-up demand. Not even a scoff. Just silence. The kind that means something landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. I did not fill that silence with an apology. I did not soften it or walk it back or add but I still want to help whenever I can to take the weight off of what I had just said. I let it sit there. And then very quietly I said, I hope the conference goes well. And I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. My coffee had gone cold. The book was still open to the same page. My hands were not shaking anymore. That surprised me. I had expected them to be shaking. I had expected to feel guilty or frightened or some nauseating mixture of both the way you feel after you've broken something you weren't sure you were allowed to break. But I just felt quiet, like a house after a storm passes. Everything rearranged but somehow cleaner for it. I did not know yet what was going to happen next. I did not know if Daniel would call me. I did not know if Natalie would come around or dig in further. I did not know if I had just made everything harder for everyone, or if I had just done the first brave thing I'd managed in 2 years. What I knew was this: I had said what was true. I had said what I meant. And I had done it without screaming, without crumbling, without apologizing before the other person even had a chance to respond. I got up, I rinsed my coffee mug, I put on my coat, and I went out to the garden. The garden had not changed. That was the thing about gardens, they kept going whether you showed up or not. The roses needed deadheading. The back corner where I had planned to put dahlias last spring was still just packed dirt waiting for something that never came. The tomato cages I had meant to pull before winter were still standing bent and rusted, holding nothing. I spent an hour out there that morning after I hung up on Natalie, not doing much, mostly just touching things, running my fingers along the fence rail, crouching down to pull a handful of weeds from around the base of the lavender bushes that had somehow survived 2 seasons of neglect. My knees ached. The November air was cold enough that I could see my breath, but I stayed out there, because inside my phone was sitting on the kitchen table, and I was not ready to go back to it yet. I knew it was going to ring again. I just didn't know who would be on the other end when it did. It rang at 2:17 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because I had come back inside by then, warmed up a bowl of soup I didn't really taste, and sat down at the table with my book open to a page I hadn't read a single word of. I was watching the clock the way you watch the sky before a storm, not because watching it changes anything, but because you need to know when it's coming. Daniel. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Mom. One word, and I could already hear everything in it. The tightness, the way his voice had that particular strained quality. It got when he was caught between 2 people he loved and had not yet figured out what to do about it. Hi, Daniel. Natalie called me. I expected she would. She's pretty upset. I didn't say anything to that. I waited. She said you refused to help with the conference week. I told her I could do one afternoon. I can't do 4 full days. Mom, it's not. She has a huge conference. This is a big deal for her career. I understand that. So you understand why she needs the help. I understand why she needs help. I don't understand why that help has to come from me at her instruction on 0 notice. He exhaled, long and slow the way he did when he was trying to be patient and wasn't quite making it. It's not 0 notice. She said she texted you this morning. She texted me at 9:42 this morning to tell me I was expected at your house for 4 consecutive days starting next week. That's not notice, Daniel. That's a schedule. Silence. I know, he said finally. I know it wasn't. She should have asked you sooner. She shouldn't have assumed at all. Mom, did she ask me at any point over the past several weeks while she was making plans for her conference? Did she think to pick up the phone and ask me whether I was available, whether 4 days worked for me? Quiet. I don't think so. No, she didn't. Because she doesn't ask me anymore, Daniel. That stopped a long time ago. Now she tells me. Now she texts me reminders for things I never agreed to. Now she calls me and says, "You will babysit because I said so." And apparently somewhere along the way that became acceptable. That got him. I could tell by the way his voice changed on the next word. She said that, those exact words. A longer pause this time. Mom, I didn't know I'll talk to her. You keep saying that. I mean it this time. You meant it last time too. He had no answer for that. And I loved him enough not to let him off the hook with silence. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm not asking you to fight with your wife. I am asking you to see what's been happening. To see that your mother has spent the last year and a half losing her life piece by piece to a schedule that nobody asked her permission for. I canceled classes. I lost friends. I have not finished a single book since last spring because every time I get an hour to myself, something comes up and I'm needed somewhere and I go because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. But I am done with it. Done with what exactly? His voice had something protective in it now. Not mean. Just scared. Done with helping us. Done with seeing Liam. Done with being taken for granted. That's what I'm done with. There is a difference, and I need you to understand that difference. I heard him shift. The creak of his office chair, probably. He was at work, I realized. She had called him at work. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, Mom, I hear you. Do you? I do. Yes, I do. Then please talk to your wife. Not to get her to back down about the conference. She can be angry about the conference, that's fine. But she needs to understand that going forward things are going to be different. I will help when I can. I will love Liam as long as I'm breathing. But I will not be managed. I will not be scheduled. And I will not be told what to do. He didn't say anything for a moment. Okay, Mom. Okay. We said goodbye. I put the phone down and stared at the table for a while. Then I picked up my book and actually read 3 pages before my eyes got heavy and I fell asleep in the chair like an old woman, which I suppose I am, though I'm not ready to admit it most days. I slept better that night than I had in months. That surprised me too. That was Tuesday. By Friday, everything had gotten worse before it was going to get better. I had not heard from Natalie since the phone call. Daniel had texted me Wednesday morning, just a short one. Almost careful, like he was picking his words before placing them. I talked to her. It didn't go great. Give it a few days, Mom, please. I had replied, I'm not going anywhere. Take your time. And I meant that. I wasn't angry. I was done being walked over, but that was different from being angry. Anger is hot and urgent and wants resolution immediately. What I was feeling was something older and slower and a good deal more patient than anger. I was willing to wait. What I was not willing to do was fold. Friday at noon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Ruth sometimes stopped by, but she usually texted first. My friend Gloria lived 40 minutes away, and we had been playing telephone tag for weeks. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to the door. It was Natalie. She was standing on my front porch in her coat, her hair pulled back in the kind of tight bun she wore on high-pressure workdays, her arms crossed over her chest. Not because she was cold, I thought. Because that was the armor she put on when she was walking into something that made her uncomfortable. I opened the door wider. I did not say come in, or it's good to see you, or any of the things I would normally say on autopilot. I just stood there and waited. I need to talk to you. All right. Can I come in? Of course. She came in, stood in my front hallway, didn't move towards the kitchen the way she usually did, the way you do when you're comfortable in someone's house. She stayed near the door. I've arranged alternate care for the conference week. Good, I'm glad. My coworker's daughter is available. She's done it before. Liam doesn't know her, but he'll be fine. He'll adjust. He's a resilient kid. A pause. I'm not here to apologize. I didn't assume you were. I think you overreacted. I kept my voice easy. I don't. I think you made a big thing out of what was just a communication problem. I could have given you more notice. I understand that. But to refuse entirely to, Natalie, she stopped. I'm not going to argue with you about whether I overreacted. We see it differently. That's okay. but I'd like you to really hear what I'm saying, and I'd like to try to say it without it turning into a fight." She looked at me with that expression she had sometimes guarded analytical, the one she probably wore in boardrooms when she was evaluating something without giving away what she thought. "Fine. When you texted me Tuesday morning and told me to plan accordingly, those were your words. I had already been showing up for your family without being asked for over a year. 3-4 days a week. I canceled things that mattered to me. I lost a friendship that mattered to me. I gave up a class I had been looking forward to for months. And I did all of that without a single word of complaint because I love your son and I love Liam and I genuinely wanted to help." She didn't interrupt. But somewhere along the way, help turned into expectation. And expectation turned into instruction. And this week, instruction turned into something that I can't let pass without saying something. "You told me I will babysit because you said so. And Natalie, no, I love you. I love your family. But no, that is not how this works." She uncrossed her arms, slowly, like she wasn't quite aware she was doing it. "I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away toward the window. "I was frustrated," she finally said. "I was overwhelmed. I'm not great when I'm overwhelmed. I know you're not. And I understand being overwhelmed. But I need you to understand that being overwhelmed doesn't give you the right to take it out on me." She nodded. "Once. Very small." "Daniel said you felt like I described you as—" She stopped, rearranged something, "as pitiful. At the grocery store. To someone. Ruth told me what you said." I watched her work through that, the way her jaw tightened, the calculation behind her eyes, not dishonest calculation, just the quick kind that smart people do when they are deciding how honest to be. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "What did you mean?" Another long pause. "I think I meant you have time, you're available, you're good at it. With Liam, you're good at it. And I think I was trying to say that it wasn't a burden for you, that it was something you were good at and something that I don't know, that you liked. And it never occurred to you to ask me whether that was true." She didn't answer, which was in its own way an answer. "Natalie, I do love spending time with Liam. I love it genuinely. But there's a world of difference between something you love and something you've been conscripted into. And somewhere in the last 18 months, this crossed that line. For me. Even if you couldn't see it." She looked at the floor. Something was shifting in her face, not crumbling, because Natalie was not a person who crumbled easily, but something was moving beneath the surface. "I never thought of it that way." "I know you didn't. That's what I'm trying to tell you." She looked up. "What does this mean going forward?" "It means we start over, differently. If you need help, you ask me. If I can, I'll say yes. If I can't, I'll say no, and neither of us will treat that as a crisis or a betrayal. It means Liam has a grandmother who shows up because she wants to be there, not because she's afraid to say she can't." She considered that for a moment. "And the conference week. I already told you I can do one afternoon. Wednesday afternoon, 3 to 6. That I can do." She nodded, looked toward the door, then back at me. "I'm not good at this," she said. "At asking, I've always just handled things. It's easier to just handle things." "I know. But Daniel's mother isn't one of your things to handle, and I need you to remember that." She left 10 minutes later. Not warmly, not with a hug or anything close to a resolution that felt finished. But she left differently than she'd arrived. The armor was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. Some small recognition that had not existed when she walked through my door. I didn't know if it was enough. I didn't know if one conversation could undo 18 months of a dynamic that had calcified slowly and silently until it felt like the natural order of things. I didn't know if Natalie was the kind of person who could sustain a change she hadn't been the one to decide on. But she had come to my door. She had knocked. She had come inside and said, "I need to talk to you," rather than picking up her phone and texting a directive. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first thing that had felt like a real conversation in a very long time. I went back to my garden. The dahlias weren't going to happen this year. The ground was too cold now. But in spring, I thought, in spring there would be time. The conference week came and went. I showed up Wednesday at 3 o'clock as promised. Liam met me at the door before I even knocked, which meant he had been watching out the window, which meant whoever had been with him that day had not been unkind, but had also not been me. He threw his arms around my waist and pressed his face into my coat, and I stood there on the doorstep holding him and letting him hold me, and I thought this is the thing, this exact thing. This is what I was fighting to protect, and I was right to fight for it. We made grilled cheese sandwiches. We watched half of a movie about a robot that wanted to be a chef. He fell asleep on the couch with his head on my lap 20 minutes before Daniel got home, and I sat in the dim light of the living room with my hand resting lightly on his back, feeling his small breathing, and I felt full. Not tired, not depleted in the bone-deep way I had been feeling for months every time I left this house. Just full. Daniel came in at 6:15, found us like that, and stopped in the doorway. He didn't say anything for a moment, then quietly enough not to wake Liam. "Hey, Mom." "Hey." "He go out easy. About 20 minutes ago." He came and sat in the armchair across from us. Didn't reach for his phone the way he usually did the moment he got home. Just sat there. "Mom," he started, "you don't have to." "I want to. I've been wanting to since Tuesday. I've been watching this happen for a long time. The way Natalie started, the way things shifted. And I knew it wasn't right. I knew it wasn't how you treat someone who's giving everything she can. And I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad, that you didn't mind, that you were happy to help." He stopped. I was wrong. I looked at my son's face. He had Robert's eyes, quiet and honest, the kind that don't lie well. "You weren't wrong that I was happy to help, in the beginning. But not lately. Not lately." "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have said something a long time ago. I should have told Natalie to slow down. I should have done better." "You should have," I agreed gently. "But you're saying it now. That counts for something." He nodded slowly, looked at his son asleep between us. "He loves you so much. You know that." "I know. I love him back just as much. That was never the problem." "No," Daniel said. "The problem was us, me and Natalie. The way we let things go too far without checking in, without asking. Yes, it's going to be different." I looked at my son and I believed him. Not blindly, not completely. Life had made me more careful with belief than that. But I believed the intention. I believed he meant it in this moment, sitting in his dim living room with his sleeping son between us, and the weight of the last 18 months pressing down on him in a way I could see on his face. "I'm going to hold you to that," I said. "I hope you do." Liam shifted in his sleep, made a small sound, settled again. We both watched him. Outside, the first snow of the season had started to fall. I could see it in the streetlight through the window, and the neighborhood had gone that particular muffled quiet that only happens when the world is covering itself in white. "I have a painting class in January," I said. "Thursday evenings, 6 to 8. I already paid." "Don't cancel it." "I won't. I'll make sure Natalie knows. And I'll need you to manage Liam on those nights, not me." "Understood." "And Daniel." "Yeah. When you need me, ask. Just ask. I'll almost always say yes, but I need to be asked." He looked at me the way children look at their parents sometimes when they understand something for the first time that maybe they should have understood years ago, and there is a specific kind of grief in that look that love doesn't quite cover. "I know, Mom. I know." The snow kept falling outside. Liam breathed between us, small and steady, and completely unaware of everything that had shifted and cracked and begun to remake itself around him. I stayed another hour before I drove home. The roads were slick and the visibility was low, and I drove slowly, carefully, the way you drive when you know the terrain has changed and you want to be sure of your footing. But I drove. And when I got home, my house was quiet and warm and entirely my own, and I stood in my kitchen for a moment before taking off my coat, just standing there in the ordinary light of an ordinary night, feeling something I hadn't quite felt in a very long time. Like I had come back to myself. Not all the way, not yet, but further than I had been in a year and a half. Closer to the woman who had planted those dahlias in her mind before the busyness swallowed her. Closer to the woman Robert married. I put the kettle on. I picked up my book. I read 15 pages before I fell asleep. And for the first time in longer than I could measure, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But the story wasn't finished, because Natalie had more to say. And what she was about to do, not in anger, not as a threat, but out of something older and more complicated than either of us had looked at, yet was going to force me to decide exactly how much I was willing to give, and exactly what I was willing to lose, to keep what I had found. 2 weeks after the snow fell, and I drove home on those slick roads feeling something close to peace, Natalie called me again. Not to argue, not to negotiate. She called on a Thursday morning just after 9, and her voice was different from any version of it I had heard before. Not hard, not compressed and efficient the way it got when she was executing something looser in it, something that took me a moment to identify because I had not heard it from her very often. She was nervous. "Evelyn, do you have a few minutes?" "I do. I've been thinking about what you said a few weeks ago, when you came to the door, when I came to your door, I mean." "I remember. I've been thinking about it a lot, actually." A pause. "Daniel and I talked. A real conversation, not just we had a real one, a long one. And I think I need to say some things to you that are harder for me to say than anything I said when I was angry." I sat down at my kitchen table. Something in her tone made me want to be seated. "I'm listening." "I grew up in a family where asking for things was weakness. My mother did everything herself. She never asked for help. She worked 40 hours a week and ran the house and raised 4 kids, and she never once said she was tired or overwhelmed. She just handled it. And I watched her do that my whole childhood, and I think I thought that was strength. I thought that was what women were supposed to look like." She stopped. I waited. "And then I had Liam. And Liam he was so much, in the best way, but so much. And I had this job that wasn't going to slow down because I had a baby. And Daniel tries, he really does, but he travels and his hours are, his hours. And you were there. You were just there. And you were so good with him. And it was so easy to let me carry it." "Yes." Her voice was quiet. "To let you carry it. And then after a while I stopped seeing it as something I was letting happen. I started seeing it as just the way things were, the way they were supposed to be. Grandmothers and grandchildren, family. I told myself it was natural." "It is natural, Natalie. That's not the wrong part. But I made it a transaction. I know I did. I made it into something you owed us instead of something you gave us. And I don't entirely know when that happened. But I know it happened. And I know that what I said to you on the phone that day was..." She stopped again, longer this time. "It was unacceptable," she said finally. "You will babysit because I said so. I've been hearing myself say that in my head for 2 weeks, and every time I hear it I feel sick. Because that's not how you talk to anyone. You're not my employee. You gave us everything, Evelyn. For almost 2 years you gave us everything, and I talked to you like you were a problem I was solving." The kitchen was very quiet. I had rehearsed this moment in my head or something like it. In the weeks since I had hung up on her, I had imagined versions of this conversation. I had imagined what I would say if she came around, what I would say if she didn't. I had made my peace with both possibilities. But now that the moment was here, I found that I did not want to perform anything I had rehearsed. I just wanted to be honest. "I appreciate you saying that. I know it cost you something." It did. A short breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. I'm not good at this. Daniel would tell you. He'd say Natalie's idea of an apology is usually sending flowers and never mentioning it again. I've received some of those flowers. I know you have. And that almost laugh again, warmer this time. I'm trying to do this differently. You are doing it differently. Another pause. The nervous quality was still there, but something had loosened in it. Can I ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me? You don't have to protect my feelings. Ask. Was there ever a point where you resented us, where you resented Liam? I need to know that. I need to know if I did that to you. It was a brave question. I knew how much it cost her to ask it. "No," I said. "I never resented Liam, not for a single day. Every moment with that child has been a gift. That part was always true, even when everything around it was breaking down." I heard her exhale. "But did I resent the situation? Yes. Did I resent feeling invisible? Yes. Did I resent that my time and my life and my dreams for my own retirement were treated like they didn't matter, like I was just a resource to be scheduled? Yes, all of that. But it was never about Liam. You should know that." "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, thank you." "Are we finished, Natalie, or is there more?" "There's one more thing, and this one is harder." I waited. I want things to be different going forward. I want to actually do that, not just say it. And I'm genuinely asking, what would that look like for you? What would make this better? I don't want to assume anymore, about anything. And I thought, there it is. That's the thing I didn't know I was waiting for. Not an apology, or not only an apology. The question. The actual genuine question asked with real interest in the answer. That was the beginning of something different. I told her what I needed. Not all of it in that call, some of it took more conversations, more time. But I told her the essentials. Ask, don't tell. Give me real notice, not reminders for things I never agreed to. Understand that my yes means I want to be there, not that I had no other option. And in return, I promised her something too. I would not let resentment build in silence again. If something was becoming too much, I would say so before it reached a breaking point. We were both bad at this in our own ways. We were going to have to learn together. We talked for 47 minutes that morning. I know because I looked at the clock when we finally said goodbye. I put the phone down and sat for a moment with my hand resting on it. Then I got up, went to the shelf where my painting supplies had been sitting untouched for months, and I took the lids off 3 of the tubes and stood there smelling the paint for no reason at all, except that it smelled like something I used to love. I thought January. The class starts in January. That was December 14th. And then 12 days before Christmas, everything fell apart again, harder this time, in a way I hadn't seen coming at all. It started with a phone call from Daniel at 7 in the morning, which was already wrong because Daniel never called before 9. I picked up with that particular low-grade alarm that parents carry all their lives, the one that fires in the chest at unexpected calls from your children, regardless of their age. Mom, hey, are you sitting down? Daniel, what happened? Nobody's hurt. I want to say that first. Nobody's hurt. Then tell me. I got laid off yesterday. The whole division. They announced it at 4 in the afternoon. 42 people. Effective January 15th. I sat down. He had asked if I was sitting. Oh, Daniel. I didn't want to call last night because I needed to process it. Natalie took it hard. She's been up since 4 this morning running numbers. We're okay for now. We have savings. But Liam's school, the after-school program, we're going to have to pull him out at least for a few months. And Natalie's salary covers the mortgage and most of the basics. But with my income gone, childcare is going to be a problem. He stopped there, very deliberately. I noticed that he stopped. He didn't ask me anything. He was telling me a fact, and he was stopping before the ask because he remembered what I had said. You need to ask. Just ask. He was waiting. I said, what do you need, Daniel? And I heard something release in him, audible even through the phone, like he'd been holding his breath. We don't know yet. We're still figuring it out. Natalie has a spreadsheet. She's been building a spreadsheet since 4 in the morning, which is how Natalie handles things she's scared of. That does sound like her. I just wanted you to know. I'm not calling to ask you to fix anything. I just wanted you to know. I appreciate that. And Mom, I want to be clear. Whatever we figure out, we're not going back to the way it was. I don't care how hard things get. We're not doing that again. I believed him. I had believed him before with less reason to, and it hadn't always worked out. But this was different. This was my son on the other side of a real crisis, having a real conversation with his mother, and choosing to be honest instead of just efficient. Come for dinner Sunday, I said. Both of you. Bring Liam. We'll figure some of it out together. Yeah, he said, and I could hear the relief in it. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mom. They came Sunday. Natalie arrived with a folder, an actual paper folder tabbed and organized because that was who she was. And I had reached the point where I could find that almost endearing rather than terrifying. Daniel carried Liam on his back up the porch steps, making sound effects with every step, and Liam was laughing the way only 5-year-olds can laugh with their entire bodies. They came in, and we ate pot roast, and Liam fell asleep on the floor with a dinosaur book over his face. And then the 3 of us sat at my kitchen table with coffee and the folder, and we talked, really talked. Not negotiated, not managed, talked. Natalie opened the folder and laid out the numbers plainly. They had 4 months of solid runway on their savings. Daniel would start job searching immediately. His field was competitive, but he had a good reputation. The most immediate pressure point was childcare. Liam's after-school program was $400 a month, which wasn't possible right now. The private babysitter they had used during the conference week was even less possible. I want to be upfront about something, Natalie said, and she was looking at me directly in that way she had when she was forcing herself to be uncomfortable. I know what this looks like. I know it looks like we're sitting here about to ask you for the same thing we were asking before, just dressed up differently because Daniel lost his job. Is that what you're doing? No, that's what I'm making sure you know we're not doing. She glanced at the folder. I've already called 2 childcare centers this week. There's a sliding scale program at the YMCA that Liam might qualify for. It's not ideal. He'd have to adjust, but it exists, and I'm pursuing it. Okay. What I'm asking you, and I want to be clear that this is a question, not a statement, is whether you would be willing to pick him up on Tuesdays. Just Tuesdays. One afternoon a week. Until Daniel finds something and we can get him back in his regular program. That's all I'm asking. I looked at her. She was holding the edge of the folder with both hands pressing it flat against the table, and I could see from the tension in her arms that this had cost her more than she was letting show. She had sat with Daniel and run this spreadsheet and contacted the YMCA and called childcare centers before she sat down at this table to ask me for one afternoon a week. She had exhausted every other option first. That was different. That was so different from everything that had come before that I had to take a moment to let it be real. Tuesdays, I said. Just Tuesdays. I can do Tuesdays. Natalie exhaled slowly, nodded once. Thank you. You don't need to thank me for one Tuesday. Yes, I do, because you don't have to, and you know that now, and I know you know that. So yes, I do need to thank you. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly. Quick and quiet, the kind of gesture long marriages make when they've run out of words. She didn't pull away. After they left, I stood at my kitchen sink washing dishes, and I thought about how strange it was that a layoff could do what 18 months of resentment hadn't. How a crisis had cracked open a conversation that had needed to happen for a very long time. I was not glad Daniel had lost his job. I would trade every breakthrough we'd had for him to still have his salary and his security and his Tuesday mornings at a desk that still had his name on the door. But I was not sorry for the conversation we'd had, or the one before it, or the one that started it all, the one that had begun with Natalie's voice saying, "You will babysit because I said so," and ended with 8 words that I had not planned and did not regret. Tuesdays became my favorite day of the week. It sounds too simple to be true, but it was true. Liam got off the bus at 3:20, and I was always there, parked at the curb in my car, and he would spot me through the bus window, and his face would do that thing, that pure, unfiltered thing that children's faces do when they see the person they're happiest to see. He would wave with both arms, every time, not one arm, both like he was trying to flag down an airplane. We drove to my house. We had a snack. He was going through a phase of extreme commitment to apple slices with peanut butter, and I was fully supportive. We did homework, or the 5-year-old version of it, which mostly involved him telling me elaborate stories about his teacher and his friends, while I helped him practice writing his letters. Then we built things or painted or watched exactly one episode of something together before Daniel or Natalie arrived. It was not 4 days a week. It was one afternoon. And it was worth more to me than those 4 days ever had been, because I chose it, and it was clean, and it was real. But here is the thing about December that I have not told you yet. Here is the twist I did not see coming. 3 days before Christmas, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A Colorado number, but not one in my contacts. I almost let it go to voicemail. I had been getting a lot of spam calls, and my policy had become to ignore anything I couldn't identify. But something made me pick up. Is this Evelyn Parker? It is. Evelyn, this is Margaret Holloway. I'm Ruth's sister. I don't know if she's mentioned me. I knew the name. Ruth's younger sister, the one who had moved to Fort Collins years ago. I had met her once at a neighborhood barbecue briefly. Margaret, yes, of course. Is Ruth all right? There was a short pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. Ruth had a stroke this morning. She's at St. Anthony's. The doctors are saying she's stable, but she's going to need some help, extended help. And she asked us to call you. She asked for you specifically. I sat down. Again. That seemed to be the posture my body had chosen for all the largest moments of this season. I'll come now, I said. You don't have to. I'll come now. Which ward? Ruth was in room 414 of the neuro unit, which I would learn the layout of very well over the following weeks. She was awake when I arrived, which the nurses told me was a good sign, though awake was a relative word. She was there behind her eyes, but moving slowly through the sediment of whatever the stroke had left behind. Her left hand worked, her right did not fully. Her speech came in patches, words dropping out and reappearing sentences that started in one direction and ended somewhere else. She looked at me when I came in, and she said very clearly and with a great deal of effort, "You came." I said I would. I wasn't sure. Ruth, hush. I pulled the chair close to her bed, and I took her left hand in both of mine, and I sat with her. That was all. I sat with her. An hour, then 2. Her sister Margaret came and went. A doctor came and explained things I wrote down in the notebook I had grabbed from my car. A nurse adjusted something. Ruth drifted in and out. When she was out, I sat with the notebook, and when she was in, I was there for her to see when she opened her eyes. Around 6 in the evening, she was more alert, watching me from the pillow with an expression that had something complicated in it. "Evelyn," she said, you were fighting with your family. That's mostly sorted. But you came anyway. You asked for me. I wasn't sure you'd... Ruth, stop being surprised that I'm here. That's not who I am." She was quiet for a moment. "I know who you are," she said carefully around the gaps the stroke had made in her speech. "That's why I called." And something about that, the simple plainness of it, the way she said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, got to me in a way that the whole long, difficult autumn had not quite managed. I felt my eyes fill up, not from grief or not only grief, from something that had no easy name, from being seen, from being known by someone who had called not because I was useful or convenient or available, but because she knew who I was and she wanted me there. I went back to the hospital every day for the next week. Between visits, I organized. I called Ruth's doctor to understand the recovery plan. I talked to Margaret, who lived 90 minutes away and couldn't manage daily visits. I talked to the social worker assigned to Ruth's case about in-home care options for when she was discharged. I made lists. I made calls. I did the things I am good at, not because anyone told me to, not because I had been scheduled into a role, but because my friend needed them done and I was the person who could do them. On Christmas Eve, Ruth was transferred out of the neuro unit to a rehabilitation floor. She could walk short distances with assistance. Her speech was improving, the words coming back one by one, like lights flickering on after a power outage. Her right hand was still unreliable, but the occupational therapist was cautiously optimistic. I was at the hospital on Christmas Eve when my phone rang. "Daniel." "Mom, where are you? I thought you were coming for dinner." "I'm at the hospital with Ruth. I'm sorry I meant to call earlier. This week got away from me." A pause. "Is she okay?" "Better than she was. She's going to need a lot of support when she gets home." "Mom," his voice shifted. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. You've been at the hospital every day. Natalie and I have been." "I'm fine, Daniel. Will you come tomorrow Christmas, even just for a few hours?" "I'll be there in the morning. I told Liam I'd come for presents." "Okay, good. We want you there." "I know you do." "Mom." "Daniel." "Yeah. Your mother is fine. She's sitting with her friend on Christmas Eve because her friend needs her and she is completely fine. Everything is all right." A long pause. "Okay." Quietly. "Okay. We'll see you tomorrow." Ruth was discharged to her home the second week of January. Margaret came down from Fort Collins and stayed a week to help with the transition. After Margaret left, I settled into a rotation, not because anyone organized it, but because that is what happens when you decide to show up for someone out of love with no conditions attached. I went Mondays and Thursdays. Margaret came weekends when she could. A home health aide came Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. Ruth's church sent people with food. Tuesday afternoons were still Liam. I was busier than I had been in years, but differently busy, not the grinding, depleting busy of being conscripted into someone else's schedule. The full, purposeful busy of a life where you have decided what matters and shown up for it on your own terms. There is a physical difference between those two kinds of busy, and I felt it in my body every day. One leaves you hollow, the other leaves you tired in the good way, the way you feel after something has been accomplished. Daniel found a new job in February. Mid-level, smaller company, a little less than he'd been making, but with better hours and better people, he said. He sounded like he meant it. Liam went back to his after-school program in March. He was sad about the Tuesdays he told me very seriously over apple slices and peanut butter on our last Tuesday pickup. He was going to miss coming to my house. "I'm still here," I told him. "Every Sunday you want to come, I'm here. Even if Mom and Dad don't need you. Especially then." He considered this with the gravity of a 5-year-old processing important information. "Okay," he said. "I'll come Sundays." And he did. Every Sunday he could all through spring, Liam came to my house. We baked, we painted, we went to the library, we planted dahlias in the back garden, finally the ones I had been putting off for 2 years. He helped me push the bulbs into the ground one by one, very careful, very serious, asking every few minutes whether they were going to grow. "They're going to grow," I told him each time. "How do you know?" "Because we put them in the right conditions, and we're going to take care of them." He seemed to find this satisfying. In April, the painting class I had registered for in January, the one that Daniel had told me not to cancel, the one I had paid for, and not canceled, wrapped up its first session. And at the very last class, the instructor put all of our work up on the walls to look at together, and I stood in front of my final piece, a small watercolor of my garden, and I felt something I can only describe as recognition. Like looking at evidence that I was still here, that I had not been entirely swallowed, that some part of me had survived the last 2 years intact. The instructor stopped beside me. She was a woman about 10 years younger than me, with paint on her forearms and an honest way of looking at things. "You've got good instincts," she said. "These colors, the way you've used the warm tones against the cool background. That's not technique, that's just how you see." "I used to see it," I said. "I'm just getting it back." She smiled, moved on to the next student. I stood in front of my small watercolor for another moment. Then I took it off the wall, wrapped it carefully, and brought it home. It was hanging in my kitchen by the time Ruth came over for dinner that Thursday, still moving slower than before, still working through the gaps the stroke had left, but moving, talking, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of sweet tea, and complaining about her physical therapist in a way that made me genuinely happy because it meant she had energy to spare for opinions. She looked at the painting on the wall. "Did you do that?" "Thursday evenings." "Evelyn." She tilted her head at it. "That's beautiful. It's not perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be yours." I thought about that for a moment. "You know what?" I said. "I think that's the whole point." She raised her sweet tea glass. We did not make a toast. We were not the toasting kind of women. But we sat together in my kitchen in the April light, 2 old friends, one of us newly recovered and one of us newly reclaimed, and the evening outside the window was going gold and soft, and somewhere in the next few weeks the dahlias were going to push up through the soil and bloom whether anyone was watching or not. Ruth put her glass down. "Did Natalie ever actually apologize, a real one?" I considered that. "She got close. Clothes only counts in horseshoes. She changed how she behaves. Some people show you who they've become instead of telling you. I think Natalie is one of those." Ruth made a sound that was not quite agreement. "I'll believe it when I see it," she said. "You will see it," I told her. "Give it time." And what happened next? What Natalie did 4 weeks later in May, completely without prompting, without Daniel suggesting it, without a crisis, forcing anyone's hand, would make even Ruth believe it. Ruth had said she would believe it when she saw it. She saw it on a Saturday morning in the second week of May, when my doorbell rang at 10:15, and I opened the front door to find Natalie standing on my porch alone. No Daniel, no Liam, no folder. Just Natalie in a light jacket holding a paper bag from the bakery 3 blocks from her house that I knew she went to on weekend mornings when she had time, which was not often. She held the bag up slightly. "I brought croissants, the almond ones you like. Can I come in?" I stepped back from the door. She came in and went straight to the kitchen, which she had never done before, without being invited further than the hallway. She set the bag on the counter, found 2 plates in the cabinet without asking where they were. She knew where they were. She had been in my kitchen enough times, and she put a croissant on each plate and carried them to the table and sat down like a woman who had made a decision and was not going to second-guess it. I sat across from her. "Daniel doesn't know I'm here," she said. He didn't put me up to this. He doesn't know I'm doing this." "Okay. I've been trying to figure out how to do this for about 6 weeks. Every time I thought I was ready, I found a reason to wait. And then last night I decided I was done waiting because waiting was just another way of avoiding it." "Avoiding what?" She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, which she had also found and filled without asking. And she looked at me with the direct, unflinching quality that I had always associated with her armor, that boardroom steadiness. But this time it felt different, not armored, just honest. "I owe you a real apology," she said. "Not the conversation we had in December. It was something. It was a start. But it wasn't an apology. It was me explaining myself. There's a difference, and I know there's a difference, and I've been telling myself for months that explaining myself was close enough. It's not." I did not say anything. I let her have the space to finish. "I treated you like staff. I treated you like someone whose job it was to be available to us, whose time existed for our benefit, whose feelings about any of it were irrelevant, secondary, something to be managed if they got inconvenient." She stopped, drew a breath. I told strangers in a grocery store that you were a lonely retired woman who enjoyed staying busy with the grandchildren. I said that out loud. About you. While you were at my house 3 days a week, keeping my life running. I said it like it was a kindness, like I was describing something that benefited you. Her jaw tightened. I have thought about that more times than I can count, and every single time I think about it, I want to go back and grab the words out of the air before they land. You can't do that. No, you can't. So I have to do something else instead. She looked at me steadily. I'm sorry, Evelyn. Not for the conference, not for the scheduling. I'm sorry for what was underneath all of that. I'm sorry that I looked at a woman who had spent her whole life giving to other people, who had just lost her husband, who was just beginning to figure out who she was going to be in the next chapter of her life, and I took that and I used it. I didn't mean to, but I did. And I'm sorry. The kitchen was quiet. A long time ago, before Robert died, before any of this, he said something to me that I had been turning over in my mind for years. We were talking about forgiveness. I don't even remember the context. Some small conflict with the neighbor that has long since faded. And he said, real forgiveness isn't what you say. It's what you stop carrying. You'll know you've forgiven someone when you can think about what they did, and it doesn't weigh anything anymore. I thought about that now, sitting across from my daughter-in-law with an almond croissant on my plate, and the May light coming through the kitchen window. I thought, does this weigh anything? And I realized it was lighter than it had been. Not gone, not weightless, but lighter. Something in it had been shifting for months quietly in the background of all the other things, and I had not noticed until this moment how much had already lifted. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know, and I mean that. I didn't do it so you'd forgive me. I know. I did it because it was true, and because you deserved to hear it. I know that too. She looked down at her croissant, picked at the edge of it. Something almost shy moved across her face, which was not an expression I had ever seen on Natalie before, not in 8 years. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me if it's too personal. Ask. Did you ever talk to Robert about us, about what was happening? I was quiet for a moment. Robert's been gone for 6 years. I know. I mean, do you talk to him still? Some people do. After. My grandmother did. She talked to my grandfather for 20 years after he died. I looked at this woman, this direct, efficient, hard-edged woman who had walked into my kitchen with croissants and an apology and was now asking me whether I talked to my dead husband, and I felt something shift inside my chest, something that was not grief and not anger and not forgiveness exactly, something that was closer to recognition, the same thing I had felt with Ruth in the hospital, the sense of being seen by someone who was actually trying to see you. Sometimes, I said, not out loud, but yes, sometimes. What does he say when you talk to him? I took a moment with that question. He says I'm doing all right, mostly. A small pause. He says I should plant the dahlias. Natalie looked at me for a moment, and then she laughed. A real one, surprised out of her, not performed, and I laughed too, and for the length of that laugh the kitchen was warmer than it had been, and the weight I had been carrying since November of last year was the lightest it had ever been. We sat together for almost 2 hours that morning. We talked about things we had never talked about in 8 years. Her mother and that house she grew up in, where asking was weakness and handling things alone was strength. We talked about Robert and what losing him had done to my sense of direction, how retirement without him had felt like arriving at a destination where your traveling companion had already left. We talked about Liam, who was 5.5, and had recently decided he wanted to be a marine biologist and a chef simultaneously, and saw no contradiction in this plan. We talked like two women who had decided finally to actually know each other. At noon, Natalie gathered her things to leave. At the door, she turned back. I signed up for something, she said. I wasn't going to tell you yet, but I want to. She hesitated in the way that people do when they are about to say something that matters to them. There's a Saturday morning class at the Art Center on Colfax, watercolor beginner, 12 sessions. She looked at me with that directness again, but soft now, uncertain. I thought if you're doing the Thursday class and I do this one on Saturdays, maybe at some point we could, I don't know, paint together or something. I'm probably terrible. I've never done it. I stared at her. She pushed on. I know it's presumptuous. I know we haven't been the kind of people who do things together. But I thought maybe that was something that could change, if you wanted it to. Natalie, you can say no. I mean it, I won't. When does it start? She blinked. June 7th. I'll be at mine through May.
We can compare notes in June.
Something crossed her face, quick then gone. But I caught it. Relief, yes, but something bigger than relief. Something that looked like the beginning of something she had not let herself hope for. "Okay," she said quietly. "June." She left. I stood in my front hallway for a moment after the door closed, and I thought about what Ruth would say when I told her. I thought she would probably say something dry and skeptical, and underneath it she would be moved, because that is who Ruth is, careful with her hope, but full of it. I called her that afternoon. I told her about the croissants and the apology and the watercolor class on Colfax. Ruth was quiet for a longer moment than usual. "Well," she finally said, "well, I suppose I do believe it. I told you. Don't be smug." "I'm not being smug. I'm being right." Those are often the same thing. But there was warmth underneath the words, and I knew she heard the warmth underneath mine. What I did not tell Ruth that afternoon was the other thing Natalie had said as she left. The thing she said very quietly, almost to herself, in the moment before she fully turned away from my door. She did not say it like a declaration. She said it the way people say things they've been holding for a long time and have finally decided to let go of. She said, "I think I've been lonely too. I just didn't have the honesty to call it that." And then she was gone down the porch steps before I could respond, which I thought was probably intentional. I turned that sentence over in my mind for days. A lonely retired woman who enjoys staying busy with the grandchildren. That was what she had called me. That was the thing she had said in the produce aisle that had hit me like a closed fist when Ruth told me about it. She had dressed up my exhaustion as fulfillment. She had described my depletion as desire. But now I heard something underneath it that I had not been able to hear before. I heard a woman who was also depleted, a woman who also worked harder than anyone saw, who also fell into bed at night and was already running 3 mental lists before her eyes closed, who had looked at her mother-in-law's constant presence and seen not a person to be considered, but a solution to a problem, because solutions were what Natalie understood, and problems were what she managed, and she had never been taught to look at the people in her life and ask whether they were drowning too. She had not done any of it out of cruelty. I had known that intellectually for a while, but understanding it in my body, feeling it land with the full weight of its truth, that was different. That happened in May in my front hallway after the croissants and the apology and the things she said almost to herself before she turned away. Some things take time to become real. Knowing is fast, understanding is slow. Daniel called that evening around 7. He had figured out she had come by, or she had told him, I didn't ask which. "Mom," she went, "Huh?" She did. "Are you, is everything?" "Everything is fine, Daniel. Better than fine." He exhaled. "She's been working up to it for weeks. I knew she was working up to it. I didn't push her because I knew it had to come from her, or it wouldn't be worth anything." "You were right about that." "Was it worth anything?" What she said. "It was worth a great deal." A pause, and in the pause I could hear him smiling. "I know my son's silences." "Good," he said. "Good." We talked for a while about ordinary things after that. His new job, which was going well, better than well. Liam's marine biology phase. The dahlia bulbs in my garden, which were showing their first tentative green inches above the soil. He asked about Ruth, and I told him she was progressing, fighting with her physical therapist as a hobby, which was a good sign. He laughed. Before we hung up, he said, "Mom, I know I've said this, but I'm glad you held your ground. Back in November. I know it was hard. I know it was scary. I'm glad you did it anyway. It was the right thing." "It was. It really was." Another pause. "Dad would have been proud of you." I did not answer right away. "He would have told me I should have done it sooner," I finally said. Daniel laughed again softly. "Yeah, he would have, in the nicest possible way. In the very nicest possible way." We said goodnight. I put the phone down and sat in my kitchen for a while in the evening quiet, and I thought about Robert, and about the dahlias, and about Natalie learning to paint on Saturday mornings, and about what it meant to be a family that was still becoming itself after all these years. Then in June, something happened that I had not planned for and could not have predicted, and it started at Ruth's kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon when she said something that changed the direction of everything that came after. June arrived warm and fast. The dahlias came up, orange and yellow and one deep burgundy that I had not expected from the label on the bulb. A surprise, the kind that gardens give you sometimes to remind you they have their own ideas. Liam came on a Sunday in early June and stood in front of the burgundy one for a long time without saying anything. Grandma Evelyn. Yeah, buddy. Did you know it was going to be that color? I hoped, but I wasn't sure. So it was a surprise. A good one. He nodded seriously as if I had confirmed an important theory. I like surprises that are good, he said. Me too, Liam. Me too. Natalie had started her watercolor class on Colfax the first Saturday of June. She texted me after the first session, an actual text conversational, nothing like the directives of last autumn, and said, "This is harder than it looks, and my trees look like angry broccoli. How do your trees look?" I texted back mine looked like angry broccoli for the first 3 sessions. Give it time. She sent back a single emoji, a tiny laughing face, and I sat looking at it for a second because I could not remember her ever sending me an emoji before. It was such a small thing. But small things I was learning were where most of the real change lived. Ruth said something at her kitchen table on the second Thursday of June when I had brought her grocery order from the store, and we were putting things away together slowly at her pace because her right side was still catching up, but she refused to let me do it all. She passed me a can to reach the high shelf, and she said without preamble, the way Ruth always spoke, "Have you thought about writing any of this down?" I reached up and slid the can onto the shelf. Writing what down? What you've been through this past year. All of it. The way things were, the way they changed. What you learned. I haven't. You should. I stepped down from my tiptoes. Why? Because, Ruth said, straightening up with some effort, and her usual refusal to acknowledge the effort. There are a lot of women out there in the exact position you were in a year ago. A lot of them. And they don't know that there's another side to it. They don't know that you can say no without losing everything. They think the choice is between sacrifice and abandonment, and there is no middle ground. She looked at me with those librarian eyes of hers, the ones that had spent 40 years deciding which books deserved to be preserved. You know there's a middle ground. Write it down. I thought about that for the rest of June. By early July, I had started. Not a book, nothing that formal, just writing. In the mornings at my kitchen table before the day started. Long form, longhand at first, and then typed because my hand cramped after 20 minutes. Writing the way I would tell it to someone I trusted. Writing the way you talk to a person who is where you used to be and needs to hear that you made it through. I wrote about Robert, about retirement and the space it left, about the way kindness becomes expectation when nobody names the line, about the produce aisle, about November and the phone call and the 8 words I said into the silence after you will babysit, because I said so. I wrote about Ruth in room 414, about Natalie on my porch with croissants, about Liam and his marine biology phase and the Bergen dahlia that surprised us both. I wrote about what I had learned, which was simpler to say than it had been to live that love given freely is a gift. Love demanded is a debt. And no one, not a daughter-in-law, not a son, not a grandchild, not a whole family, has the right to turn your gift into their debt without your consent. Patricia called me in July, the first real call we'd had since I canceled on her the second time, and she had quietly stopped reaching out. "I've been thinking about you," she said. "I heard through the grapevine, Ruth. Is she doing okay?" "Better every week." "I'm glad." A pause. "Evelyn, I owe you a conversation. I let our friendship go cold, and I think I did that partly because I was hurt, and partly because I didn't want to ask what was going on and have it be something I couldn't fix." "Patricia, let me finish. I should have just called. I should have just asked. I'm sorry." People kept apologizing to me this year, and every time one did, I felt the particular strange grace of it, not the satisfaction of being owed something, but the recognition of being counted, of mattering enough to someone that they took the discomfort of accountability seriously. "I should have called you too," I said. "Things were complicated, and I used that as an excuse to disappear. I'm sorry too." "Well, we're both sorry." "We are. Do you want to get lunch next week?" "I want to get lunch next week very much." We had lunch. We had it at a restaurant we used to go to years ago, before all the cancellations, before I had let the friendship atrophy through absence and excuses. We sat for 3 hours, and I told her most of what had happened, and she listened with the particular quality of attention that old friends have, not just hearing, but knowing where to put it, how to hold it, what it means in the context of everything she already knows about you. She said, "You were always too willing to say yes." I know. Even before Robert died, even at school, You used to take on other people's extra kids during recess when the other aides were short-staffed and you never said a word. I liked the kids. You liked the kids, but you also didn't know how to say, this isn't my responsibility. You've never been good at that. I'm getting better. You're getting better, she agreed. That phone call you described, that took guts. It took too long. Most things do. The fact that it happened is what counts. She ordered us both another glass of iced tea and told me about her own year, which had had its own complications, and we traded stories the way old friends do. And by the end of the afternoon, we had set 2 more lunch dates, and I felt the particular warmth of something restored. On the drive home, I thought about all the things that had been restored this year. The garden, the painting, Patricia. Ruth still recovering but stubbornly and completely herself. My Sundays with Liam chosen and clean and joyful in a way that all those conscripted weekdays had never been. My Thursday evenings that belonged to nobody's schedule but mine. And something that was harder to name, but just as real, some version of myself that I had been slowly mislaying for 18 months, that I had retrieved piece by piece over the course of one long, turbulent year that was more fully present in my own life now than it had been since the day Robert died. I thought about what he would have said if he could see all of it. The November phone call, the winter, the spring, the dahlias, Natalie and her croissants, and her angry broccoli trees. He would not have made it into a lesson. Robert was never a lesson-making kind of man. He would have just squeezed my shoulder the way he did the particular squeeze that said, I see you. I see what you did. I know what it cost. And then he probably would have asked if there was any of that pot roast left. I smiled to myself at the stoplight on Morrison Road. The thing I had not yet told anyone, not Ruth, not Patricia, not Daniel, was what I had found in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning in mid-July. An envelope with the community center's return address. Inside it was a short letter. They were expanding their Thursday evening art program in the fall, adding a new session, and they were looking for an assistant instructor, someone with patience and experience, working with adults and seniors, someone who could help beginning students feel comfortable with the materials, help the newer participants not get discouraged in those first sessions when everything looked like angry broccoli and nothing looked like what you meant it to look like. The pay was small. The commitment was 6. Thursday evenings, 1 session. I read the letter twice. Then I put it on my kitchen table and left it there for 4 days, walking past it every morning and every evening, not deciding, just letting it sit there and be a possibility. On the 5th day, I picked it up, read it one more time. And then I went to my shelf, found a piece of my good stationery, the cream-colored kind that Robert had given me years ago for writing. Thank you notes, which I had barely touched since he passed, and I wrote back. I said yes. But not the old yes, the reflex yes, the yes I had said for 18 months to a schedule that was never mine to carry. This was a different yes. This was the yes of a woman who knew exactly what she was saying yes to and exactly what she was not, and had chosen this particular thing freely, with both eyes open, because it was hers to choose. I sealed the envelope. I put a stamp on it. I walked out to my mailbox and put it inside and raised the flag. And then I stood on my front porch in the July heat and looked out at the street and the sky and thought about what comes next. Not with anxiety, not with the low-grade dread that had been my companion for most of the past 2 years, just with attention, with the clear-eyed openness of someone who has come through something hard and found herself on the other side of it more intact than she expected. There was still more to come. There always is. Families don't resolve themselves in a season. People don't change entirely and stay changed without effort and maintenance. Ruth was still recovering. Patricia and I were still rebuilding. Daniel and Natalie were still learning, both of them, what it looked like to treat the people they loved with the full consideration those people deserved. And I was still learning too, still practicing the thing that had not come naturally to me for 67 years. The thing that sounds so simple when you say it out loud and costs so much when you actually try to live it. Showing up for others because you want to, not because you cannot say no. But there was one last thing that happened in August, one final moment that I had not seen coming, that arrived on an otherwise ordinary evening and rearranged something inside me so quietly and so completely that I did not even understand what had shifted until I was lying awake at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling, feeling a peace so unfamiliar that it took me a full minute to recognize what it was. The ordinary evening I had not seen coming was a Thursday in the second week of August. I had just finished my 4th session as assistant instructor at the Thursday evening class. 4 weeks in, and I had found my footing in a way that surprised me. Teaching adults was different from working with children, though not in the ways I expected. Children come to learning open and undefended. They don't yet know enough to be embarrassed by not knowing. Adults carry their embarrassment with them into the room like a second coat. They hold brushes too tightly and apologize for their work before anyone has looked at it. They say things like, "I've never been artistic," as if artistry were something you were issued at birth, rather than something you practiced in the particular imperfect way of anyone willing to sit with a blank page and try. My job, I discovered, was mostly to be the person who took the apology away before they could make it. I would come up beside someone whose tree looked like a thundercloud, or whose water looked like concrete, and I would say, "Look at this color here. Look at what you did with this edge. Look at how this area breathes." And I would mean it, because there was always something true to say if you were willing to look for it. That was one thing 35 years with children had taught me. You could always find the thing worth saying yes to if you were paying attention. That Thursday I drove home with the particular lightness I had started carrying on Thursday evenings. The night was warm and clear, the kind of August evening that Colorado does better than almost anywhere, and I had my windows down and I was not thinking about anything complicated. Just driving. Just the warm air and the quiet road and the radio on low playing something I half recognized. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat as I pulled into my driveway. A text from Natalie. I sat in the car and read it. It was longer than her texts usually were. Natalie texted in short declarative sentences. She had never been a long text person, even after things changed between us. So the length of this one made me pause before I read the words. "Evelyn, I know it's late and I know you just got home from class. You can read this tomorrow, it's not urgent. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for a while, and I decided tonight was the night. I showed one of my watercolors to my instructor today. She said it had good instincts. I actually cried a little in the car afterward, and I don't entirely know why, except that I think it's been a very long time since anyone evaluated something I made instead of something I managed. I thought of you. I thought of what you said about getting something back that you'd lost. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. I don't know if I ever said thank you for that. Not for the babysitting, for the example. For showing me that it was possible to want something for yourself and not feel guilty about it. I'm working on that. I have a long way to go, but I'm working on it. N. I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I sat in my car in my driveway for several minutes without moving. Natalie Brooks, who had come into my son's life 8 years ago, moving at a speed that made me tired just watching, who had run her household like a project with deliverables, who had stood in my kitchen with crossed arms and said, "I'm not here to apologize." Natalie had sat in her car in a parking lot after a watercolor class and cried over someone saying her work had good instincts. And she had thought of me, and she had said thank you not for what I had given her, but for what I had shown her. I put my phone down. I looked out the windshield at my house, my porch, the light I had left on in the front window. Robert, I thought, you should see this. And in the particular silence of the car and the night, I felt something I can only describe as his agreement. The sense of being witnessed by someone who already knew the end of the story and had been patient while I caught up. I went inside, made tea, sat at my kitchen table. I wrote back to Natalie. Not immediately, I let myself sit with it first. But before I went to bed, I typed, "Natalie, thank you for saying that. Thank you for crying in the parking lot, too. That's what it feels like when something that matters finally lands. You're not working on it wrong. You're working on it exactly right. Sleep well, E." I lay awake for a while after that, not from anxiety, not from the low-grade restlessness that had kept me up many nights over the past year, just from the fullness of it. The way August had arrived with all of this inside it. The garden and the dahlias and the painting class, and Patricia at lunch, and Ruth putting cans away with her left hand, and Natalie crying in a parking lot over good instincts. I thought about November, about standing in this same kitchen phone in my hand, heart hammering, saying 8 words into a deadline that had changed the direction of everything. I thought about how frightened I had been, not of Natalie's anger, not of the conflict, but of myself, of what it would mean to stop performing the old Evelyn, the always available one, the one who said yes before the question left anyone's mouth. I had been afraid that if I stopped being that woman, I would not know who was underneath her. Lying in the dark in August, a full year after it all began, I thought I know now. She was the woman who planted dahlias and finally grew them, the woman who stood in front of her watercolor and felt recognized, The woman who drove to room 414 without hesitating when her friend needed her, not because anyone scheduled it, but because that was who she was. The woman who sat at a kitchen table on Thursday mornings and wrote it all down because Ruth said someone needed to hear the other side of it. She was me. She had always been me. She had just been buried under 18 months of other people's needs, and it had taken one refused phone call to start digging her back out. I fell asleep before midnight and slept until 7, which was in its own quiet way a miracle. August moved forward. The days shortened by small degrees that you couldn't quite feel individually, but that accumulated into something real. I finished the first session of assistant instruction, and the coordinator asked if I would come back for fall. I said yes, the real kind, the chosen kind, and we scheduled 6 more Thursday evenings starting in September. I was writing most mornings now. The long account of the year which had grown past what I had expected when I started. I had thought it would be a few pages. It was closer to 60. Writing it had done something I hadn't anticipated. It had given the whole year a shape. It had let me see not just the hard parts, but the arc of them. The way one moment led to the next and the next, until here in August with dahlias in the garden and paint under my fingernails and a Thursday evening that was mine. Daniel came by on a Saturday morning without Natalie or Liam. Just him the way he used to come by when he was young and needed to talk to his mother about something without the audience of a full house. He came in and went directly to the coffee maker, which was also something he had done since he was 19 years old, and he poured himself a cup and sat across from me at the kitchen table and said nothing for a moment. I waited. "I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately," he said. "Me too. I think about what he'd think of everything, this past year, what happened with you and Natalie, what I did or didn't do." He wrapped both hands around the mug the way Natalie had in May, which made me think not for the first time that people who love each other long enough start to move the same way. I think he'd be disappointed in me for letting it go on as long as it did. I think he'd understand you. Understanding isn't the same as approval. "No," I agreed. "But your father was a man who knew the difference between a mistake and a character failure. He never confused those." Daniel looked at his coffee. "I should have stood up sooner. For you, that's the part that stays with me. She's my wife and I love her and she's better than she showed you last year. I know that. But you're my mother. And I watched it happen and I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad." "Why are you telling me this now?" He looked up. "Because Liam asked me something last week that I haven't been able to stop thinking about." I waited. He asked me why Grandma Evelyn seemed happier now than before. He said, "And I'm giving you the 5-year-old version." He said she used to seem tired when she left our house and now she doesn't. Daniel paused. "He's 5, and he noticed what I should have noticed a year and a half ago." The kitchen was very quiet. "Kids see everything," I said. "He really does." A short breath, almost a laugh, but carrying something heavier. I told him that Grandma Evelyn had figured some things out, and he asked what kinds of things, and I said the kinds of things about knowing what you need and not being afraid to say so. What did he say to that? He thought about it for about 30 seconds very seriously, and then he said I need more apple slices, so I gave him more apple slices. I laughed, and Daniel laughed too, and for a moment we were just a mother and her son in a kitchen on a Saturday morning, laughing about a 5-year-old's priorities, and the weight that had been in the conversation lifted without either of us lifting it. "He's going to be all right, that kid," I said. "He's going to be better than all right." Daniel looked at me steadily. "Because he has you, the real you, not the exhausted you, not the one who was running on empty and didn't say so, the one who shows up Sunday mornings because she wants to be there. I've always wanted to be there. I know, but now he can feel it. There's a difference." And that distinction, so simple and so true, was the thing that settled in my chest and stayed there. There is a difference between being present out of obligation and being present out of love. A child can feel it. Probably they all can. Probably the people we love most have always been able to feel the difference, even when we couldn't admit there was one. September arrived, and with it the fall session of the Thursday class. New students, same anxiety, same white-knuckled grip on brushes, same apologies issued before anyone had seen a single brushstroke. I had gotten better at the preemptive redirect. Before someone could tell me they weren't artistic, I would hand them a brush and say, "Show me what you see. Not what you can do, what you see." It worked mostly. One of the new students was a woman named Carol, 72 years old, recently widowed. She came to the first session in a good blazer, as if she were attending a job interview, and sat in the back corner and held her brush so carefully that nothing she painted had any life in it at all. I could see what was happening. She was trying to do it right. She was so focused on not doing it wrong that her hands had no room to move freely. I sat next to her in the second session, and I said nothing about technique. I asked her about her husband, what he had been like, what she missed most. She told me about a man named Gerald who made terrible puns and drove her crazy with them for 44 years, and now she would give anything to hear one more. She talked for 12 minutes while her brush moved without her noticing it was moving. When she looked down at what she had made, there were tears on her face. "That's better," I said quietly. She looked at the painting, then at me. I wasn't even paying attention. "That's why it's better." She came back every week after that. By the 5th session, her trees still didn't look exactly like trees, but they had something in them. A feeling. An intention. She stopped wearing the blazer. After the 3rd session, she caught me by the door as everyone was packing up. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "Did you always know how to do this, help people? The way you seem like someone who just knows where to look, where the real thing is underneath the scared thing." I thought about November, about the phone that cracked when I slammed it down, about the garden that had gone 2 seasons without proper attention, and the friends I had almost lost, and the year of slowly, painfully learning to look for the real thing underneath the scared thing in myself. "No," I said. "I had to learn it the hard way, recently actually." She looked at me with the particular attention of someone who recognizes a version of their own story in someone else's face. "Would you tell me sometime?" "I think I'm telling it right now," I said, in a roundabout way. She smiled. First real one I had seen from her. "Good instincts," she said. And I thought of Natalie in a parking lot, and I thought of my instructor in January saying it to me, and I thought of the way these things travel, how one person's hard-won clarity can become someone else's light if you're willing to share it. "Thank you, Carol," I said, and I meant it. October came. The dahlias finished their season going out in a last week of extravagant color before the cold took them. I cut the burgundy ones and put them in a vase on my kitchen table, and they lasted 8 days, which felt like a small victory over time. Ruth came for dinner on a Thursday in mid-October, no longer needing me to drive her, which was a milestone we both pretended not to make a big deal of, while clearly making a big deal of it. She walked up my porch steps on her own slowly and with attention, and came in and sat at my table and looked at the dahlias in the vase. "Those are from your garden, finally. You planted those when, April, with Liam." She looked at them for a moment. 2 years of planning," she said, "give or take. Worth it. Ruth, look at them." She made her sound that was agreement dressed up as skepticism. We had dinner. She was moving better than she had in months. The occupational therapist had upgraded her from twice weekly to once weekly, which the therapist had framed clinically, and Ruth had framed as winning. We talked about her sister Margaret, who was coming for Thanksgiving. We talked about my writing, which Ruth had been asking about with increasing frequency, and which I had been cautiously evasive about because I was not sure yet what I was going to do with it. "You need to share it," Ruth said. It was not a question. "I'm thinking about it." "You've been thinking about it since July." "Some things deserve a long think." "Some things deserve a long think," she agreed, "and then they deserve to get done." I told her I was considering sending it to the woman who ran a small online community for women over 50 that Patricia had mentioned to me. A space Patricia had described it where women shared stories about the second half of their lives, the real ones, not the curated ones. Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Would you read me some of it?" I went to get my laptop. I sat back down across from her, and I read her the beginning. The hook, the November morning, and the cracked phone battery. And then I read her the parts about the produce aisle and the hospital and the apology on my porch, and Carol in the Thursday evening class, who painted better when she stopped paying attention. Ruth listened the whole way through without saying a word, which was itself remarkable, because Ruth had opinions about most things, and generally did not hold them in reserve. When I stopped, she was quiet for another moment. "Send it," she said. "You think, Evelyn, I am 71 years old. I survived a stroke. I have very limited patience for things that deserve to exist, but are being held back out of shyness." She looked at me squarely. "Send it." I sent it 2 days later. A Saturday morning coffee on the table laptop opened the write-up of the whole year attached. My name on it. All of it. I hit send, and then I closed the laptop and went out to check on the garden and did not think about it again until Monday, which was a kind of discipline I was proud of. The response came Monday afternoon. The woman who ran this community, her name was Janet, 64, a former social worker from outside of Chicago, wrote back 4 paragraphs. She said she had read it twice. She said she had forwarded it to 3 women in her life before she had even finished the second read. She said, "This is the thing that doesn't get said enough. That you can love people completely and still require them to treat you like a person. That those 2 things are not in conflict. That saying no to being managed is not the same as saying no to love." She asked if she could share it. I wrote back yes, the real kind, the chosen kind. Within 2 weeks, I had received more messages than I had received in probably 5 years combined. Women from Ohio and Florida and Oregon and places in between, women in their 50s and 60s and 70s, women who said, "I thought I was the only one." Women who said, "I've been trying to find the words for what this feels like, and you found them." Women who said, "I showed this to my daughter-in-law, and we cried together for an hour, and I think something shifted." I sat at my kitchen table on a Thursday morning in early November, exactly 1 year since the phone call that started everything, and I read through the messages slowly, one by one, and I cried, not from sadness, from the accumulation of being recognized, from understanding finally and fully why Ruth had said write it down. Because your story belongs to you, but the truth inside it belongs to everyone who has ever needed it. Daniel called that afternoon. He had seen it. One of his co-workers had shared it without knowing it was his mother, which he described with a laugh that had no embarrassment in it, only warmth. "Mom, you're everywhere. I wrote about your family." "I know. I read it." A pause. "You were fair. I want you to know that. You were fair to all of us, including me." "I tried to be." "You were." A silence, the comfortable kind. "Dad would have printed it out," Daniel said. "Put it on the refrigerator. You know he would have. He would have printed out 15 copies, given them to people he barely knew. He absolutely would have." We laughed together, the easy laugh of shared memory, and it was the best kind of moment, the kind where grief and love occupy the same space without either one crowding the other out. Natalie called 20 minutes after Daniel. She had also read it. "I'm in the parking lot again," she said. "Your car parking lot. The same one, after class." A short breath. "You didn't make me the villain." "You weren't the villain. I wasn't the hero either." "No, but you became something better than either one. You became honest. That's harder." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to hang this in my office," she said. "The thing you wrote. The part about the difference between love given freely and love demanded as a debt. I'm going to put it where I can see it." I thought about Natalie's office, the organized, efficient, high-functioning space where she managed deliverables and moved at a speed that used to exhaust me to watch. "Put it somewhere you'll actually see it," I said. "Not just somewhere it looks good." She laughed, short and real. "Yes, ma'am," she said. And the "yes, ma'am," easy, unguarded, warm, was itself a small revolution. 8 years, and she had never said anything to me that sounded quite like that. Not submissive, not performative, just easy. The way you talk to someone you have actually decided to know. November moved through its first week. The garden was done for the season. I had already ordered dahlia bulbs for spring, more this time, enough to fill the back corner I had been leaving empty for 2 years. Liam had requested we do the planting together again very seriously at the end of our Sunday visit the week before. He had a plan involving where each color should go, which he had drawn on the back of a piece of notebook paper and presented to me like a document for review. I had approved it with full seriousness. We had spent the rest of that Sunday painting. He was doing a picture of our garden, the dahlia version, the one that existed in his head, and I was working on something of my own. We sat side by side at my kitchen table in the afternoon light, both of us bent over our work, both of us quiet in the focused way that painting makes you quiet, and at some point Liam put down his brush and looked at mine and said, "Grandma Evelyn, that's really good." "Thank you, buddy." "Did you always know how to do that?" "No, I'm still learning." He accepted this with the uncomplicated ease of a child, for whom learning things is still simply what you do. "Me too," he said, and picked up his brush again. I thought about that for days. Me too. The casual grace of it. The way he said it without any weight. Not I'm bad at it, not I'm trying, not I'm not artistic. Just me too. As if being in the middle of learning something was the most natural place in the world to be. I was still learning. At 67, after 35 years of one career and one marriage and one way of understanding who I was supposed to be in relation to the people I loved, I was in the middle of learning something. The most natural place in the world to be. I thought about all the women who had written to me, the ones in Florida and Ohio and Oregon, the ones who had said I thought I was the only one. I thought about what I would say to them if I could sit across a kitchen table from each of them, the way I had sat across from Natalie in May, the way I had sat with Ruth in the hospital, the way I sat now with Carol on Thursday evenings when her hands forgot to be afraid. I would say you are not the only one, not even close. I would say the thing you are afraid will break your family if you say it is probably the thing that will save it. I would say love is not the same as availability. Presence is not the same as sacrifice. You can give fully and still require to be seen. These things are not contradictions. They are the whole point. I would say plant the dahlias. Even if the season is almost over, plant them anyway and wait. I would say the woman underneath the obligation, the one who wanted things and had dreams and needed rest and deserved to be asked rather than told she is still there. She did not leave. She has been waiting patient and intact for you to remember her. I would say go remember her. 1 year after I slammed a phone down hard enough to crack the battery cover, I sat at my kitchen table on a November evening with a cup of tea going warm and the last of the dahlias pressed between pages of my good notebook and my laptop open to 60 pages I had written from the truest place I know how to reach. Ruth's number on my phone for Thursday. Liam's drawing of the spring garden taped to my refrigerator. A Thursday evening class that was mine. A Sunday afternoon that was chosen. A calendar that belonged to me. I was not finished. I would not be finished. Life at 67 is not a conclusion. It is I had learned one of the more interesting chapters if you refuse to let anyone write it for you. But I was here, present and whole and fully, irreversibly, recognizably myself. And the most important thing I want you to hear, whoever you are, wherever you are watching this from whatever kitchen or living room or parked car you are sitting in right now, is this. You did not lose yourself permanently. You are not too far in to find your way back. It is not too late to say the thing you have been swallowing. It is not selfish to need to be asked. It is not abandonment to require that the people who love you treat you like a person who has a life worth considering. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to want things. You are allowed to say no without a paragraph of explanation. And yes, only when you mean it, and I need more time before I answer without it being treated as a crisis. I was 67 years old when I learned to do this. I did it imperfectly and loudly, and with a cracked phone battery cover, and a garden full of unplanted dahlias, and a year of hard conversations that cost me something real. And I would do every single bit of it again. Because what I found on the other side of that one refused phone call was not the wreckage I had been afraid of. It was not a broken family or a ruined relationship or the loneliness of a woman who asked for too much. What I found was my life, still here, still mine, still worth showing up for on my own terms in my own time with my own 2 hands and a brush and a packet of dahlia bulbs and 60 pages of truth and a grandson who says me too without any weight at all. I found myself, and I am never letting her go again.